We are live for the first one of one episode of the new Sports Wagering University podcast. This is going to be a fun little trio we got on board today for this first time endeavor. This is going to be a weekly show, but like I said, this is the first Sports Wagering University podcast episode. We've got a couple other fine fellows here with me other than myself. And I have Paul Conley at Conley Paul on Twitter. Make sure to give him a follow. Chris Farley, Mr. Circa himself at Farley Bets. We'll get into that. This is going to be a good educational program based around the events of the Circa contest that took place this year. We've got some really good familiarization tools and tidbits to get into for you guys. And like I said, this is the first of it all. This is a huge jump in point for us three. I know we're really excited to work with each other. Without further ado, let's just send it in a rotisserie style introduction here. And, we'll start with Paul. Paul, why don't you just talk a little bit about yourself and let the new listeners know a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Devin. I'm excited about this. I have another podcast I started last year, and I really enjoy it. You just get to sit here and talk. And I've loved sports my whole life. And then probably at about 8, I participated in my dad's office football pool. And you just had to pick the winners, and it was on like a piece of paper. And I think you put in $2. And I took it seriously. I wanted to win. And then I graduated to 4-team teasers and all that fun stuff that I was doing when I was in high school. And I've just loved it. I love the industry, love sports, love sports betting. So excited to do this and try to educate and try to hopefully get over on some of the sports books.
Yeah, someone's got to take over those books. They definitely do it to the people enough. So, uh, Chris, I mean, like Mr. Accolades over here with the Circa contest stuff. But we all got some wonderful backstories here. Mine started. I grew up in bowling alleys, so I saw in Oklahoma. So I saw a ton of gambling, a ton of $1,000 games by the time I was 8 years old, and I wanted to figure out how to wager and make money and stuff. So sports, like Paul, I was very much so into it from an early age. And from what I understand, Chris as well. It seems like we all just have a fanaticism.
Oh yeah, all a bunch of sports junkies. Yeah, so Chris Farley at Farley Bets on Twitter. Yes, Circa is probably the topic of the hour. Well, actually, it is the topic of the hour because that's what we're going to talk about today. I just feel very grateful for that. I mean, you can't ever like predict that you're going to win any money in Circa. It's like so tough to do, and it was our first entry, so it was awesome. But we'll get to that later. A little bit about me. Yeah, I Paul actually brought back some memories for me. I remember playing my dad's pool every NFL week as well. I think it was also $2 for me, not against the spread. You just pick the teams. But rarely did anyone pick every team right. It was like, usually like you got 3 wrong and you still won. So I was always fascinated with sports too. Love football and basketball mainly, which makes sense because I'm an NFL and an NBA guy mainly in handicapping. Hit 58% in the NBA last year, which kind of brought me onto the scene after I was given a chance at the Odds Breakers to do some writing and podcasting. Still very grateful for that. Not sure where I would be without that. And I've been involved with this at Sports Wagering University now for a good half a year. And I could not be more excited, guys. I mean, we are literally just talking about sports and how to sports bet and all the different things that go behind it. And there's a lot to talk about. As I think the world is starting to see, gambling is becoming a little less degenerate and more of a science.
Yeah.
So it's, pretty awesome, guys. And it's awesome to be here. And I never consider this like work. We're talking about sports. We're talking about sports betting. You can't get any better than that.
It's a definite fun thing to get into, speaking to the new folks out there, not even new listeners, but just new people within this industry and this market. It's just like a bunch of different stuff throughout the country, and people, states are starting to legalize it in different ways. New York getting the mobile betting, that was huge. I'm sure folks have seen that all over business journals and Twitter and such. But we look and we see the scarlet letter starting to lose a little bit of that brightness, and it's starting to just lose less and less of that crimson and scarlet tone, and people are wanting to learn how to make money on it. And that's what we're, here for. And then also to educate. It's not about the money and making money and becoming rich. And it's understanding the long view process and understanding the enrichment that goes into your knowledge and your data bank and the way that you discipline yourself. And for one, I'm excited to learn more because, we're all in this together, and there's always some knowledge reflections to have. So,
Well, and to that point, you can't know it all. Like, it is a never ending, always evolving, always changing science. And when you think you have something figured out, something completely different changes and throws you for a loop. So this is going to be really exciting.
yes. And, just to further more talk about, the education aspect of this, and, that is the backbone of Sports Wagering University here. And, make sure to go over to sportswageringu.com to make sure to check out upcoming classes. We got a awesome class coming up for February, going to be college basketball featured. And, Mr. Kyle Hunter out there, for you guys on the Twitter sphere that know the name, he is also involved here with SWU. So make sure to give the Twitter page at Sports Wagering U a follow. Go to our website, get familiar with all the content, and get to familiarize yourself with our guys. Starting with us three right here doing this podcast.
It's the perfect time to do it. You got to get ready for March Madness.
Oh, man. March.
You have to. And then, I mean, guys, is there anyone better than Kyle Hunter? I don't know if you guys saw his college football record this year, but if there was a college football circa, I'm pretty sure Kyle would have done really well.
He would have been tough to beat. He was hot this year.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
He's always
somehow, some way, we've assembled quite a group at Sports Wager University. I mean, these classes are going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Well, I think that actually brings up a point that has to be said. My guess is it's because a lot of people want to help other people and they want to educate people. There's so many people that kind of want to sell the picks and want to do the things that, hey, my lock of the century, of the week, of the month. And this, you're putting together a good group of people because they want to educate.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and isn't that a consequence of what happens? I mean, not to get off on a rant here, but sports betting becoming so legalized everywhere, it's also becoming incredibly oversaturated. There's everybody and their brother kind of thinks that they can give out a pick or that they're an expert on this or that, but there are real processes and there's a real discipline to this, especially for that long-term view, which is everybody wants to win instantly today. But hey, that Circa contest took 19 weeks of prep. It wasn't. I'll be firsthand experience. It was not easy and it was very stressful.
Yeah.
But yeah, you can't just stumble into this without any principles and expect to win on the long-term basis.
Right. And the thing that we should honestly point out also here is, with a lot of new bettors and a lot of new markets come a lot of other people that don't want to help folks out, that are poachers, So yeah, it sucks that it's out there, but it's in every industry: pharmaceutical, big tobacco, commerce, hospitality, whatever you work at. Unfortunately, there are those negative go-getters out there. So that's, another thing that we want to help with is also making sure that everyone knows that it's a safe thing to get into. There's a lot of people that are on the fence about betting and how to do it, obviously. So, and, speaking of being familiar with certain things within the industry, the Circa, I know we keep referencing the Circa. Well, Chris, do you want to explain the Circa? I mean, I feel like you probably have the more right here than anyone, but
Sure.
I feel like you know something about this contest, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, I got a definition right here in front of me and some great notes, but you go for it.
Sure. Yeah. Now I can't give you the history. I'm not sure how long the Circuit contest has been around. I think quite some time, I think. But I do think, I mean, according to other sharp sports bettors, it's kind of surpassed the Super Contest as far as just legitimacy, the prizes that you can win. So this year, every year it varies, but this year there was over 4,000 contestants, 4,087 to be exact, I believe. And you have to register before the season, obviously, and you have to register in Las Vegas. Right. It's still one of those, it's kind of old school in that way, right? You can't just go online. And But a great way to do that, and still to be able to compete in the contest, is then you get a proxy after that. And there are, proxies that professional sports bettors know, but there are also proxies that are just available to everybody. So you pay for a proxy service, and that proxy service puts in your picks every week, so you don't have to be there in Las Vegas actually going to the Circa Sportsbook. But yeah, I mean, I consider it the foremost NFL sports betting contest in the country. There's a ton of participants, a ton of really sharp guys in there every year. I mean, Steve Fezzik, who I believe has won it twice. I know some of the guys that I rub elbows with. Chris in Vegas, who has won multiple times, was in it this year. I'm pretty sure he's in it every year. And there's also Circa Survivor, which is like a traditional Survivor contest, just at on a bigger scale. And of course, perhaps the most important part is what you're paid at the end. The top 50 contestants at the end of the season do get paid out. First place gets $1 million. And then between 15 and first place is anywhere between, I believe, 25 grand up to like 325 grand. And then I believe 16th through 50th get paid like a distribution of 230,000. So, but that all sounds great, but to make it to that top 50, you just ask some pro sports bettors who were in it, who had remarkable records, like 62, 63%, and they didn't get any money. And in this industry, if you're hitting over 54%, you're usually considered a very, very sharp bettor. So in order for us to win in the fifth place this year, we hit 68%, which is just, I mean, there has to be, we can get into more of that, but the variance throughout the season, listen, the whistle was blown our way a few times, the ball bounced our way a few times, definitely bounced against us a few times too. Sometimes it's a little bit of a prayer and a little bit of luck too, but so I think I covered that well, Devin. I don't know how long it's been around. That's the one thing I should probably. I probably know that.
I probably should have fact checked that as you were talking, but I was honestly captivated by you talk, and I was listening up. So I'm sure that's something we can definitely confirm. But I know it's been going for at least, at least, I want to say, did it make it into the 90s? Was it in the 90s?
I don't know.
It's been around for a while. I can definitely find out. I've obviously personally never partaken. So the proxy service side of that, whenever you talked about that, that was something that even me being involved with this project and a quote unquote seasoned experienced sports bettor and all that good stuff, I honestly didn't even think to put a thought about the whole proxy and how you would get your picks there and everything, because I knew you registered in person. So that's no, that was a good little tidbit of information that I didn't even know about the Circa. So awesome.
And just looking at, I mean, you think about it, you think, oh, okay, they pay the top 50 people. Of 4,000 people, you're in the top 1% in arguably one of, if not the number one sportsbook NFL contest. And you have to be consistently above 3-2 each week to be able to get there. One bad week can really sink the whole thing. So it's amazing, honestly. Like, I'm looking at the standings now. It's just incredible that, that you guys were able to be there. And what were those final few weeks like? Because you weren't exactly in first or in fifth, and where were you going into the final 2 weeks? Walk us through that a little bit.
Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate you asking that. I mean, I could say plenty about that. We were, getting more excited and more nervous at the same time. I think at the point where we were starting to get really like, oh, this is possible, is I believe in like week 14 or 15, we hit the top 50. So we were like hovering around the second page for a very long time, like 70th, 58th, just like all around there. So we were in it. We were being very consistent. So we had a lot of 4-1 weeks, 3-2, 4-1, an occasional 5-0. And we only had 1 week early in the season, I believe it was like week 2 or 3, where we went 1-4. So, that was like, oh shit, I don't know, because you do realize that right away. You can't have more than a few weeks like that, or else you're basically out of it. So yeah, I mean, every week we would just climb a little bit more. We went to 22nd, I believe, at one point, and then the week leading up to the final, week 18, we were in 12th place. So we were, from our perspective, we were within firing range of you making some real considerable money. And I must say, I mean, you do feel that, right? Just as a regular guy. I mean, I'm absolutely a regular guy in most ways. I mean, I have a 9-to-5 job. I have a wife. I have a German Shepherd. I have, I have a house that I pay a mortgage on. I mean, I have stuff to take care of. So leading up to that, you almost feel pressure, just like, hey, I really, this money is within sight for my family, for us to be able to do some things. So like, I really don't want to mess this up, because you're in 12th place. You go 1 and 4, you're probably not going to make any money. You go 2 and 3, you're probably not going to make any money. If you're lucky, 3 and 2, maybe you still hang around. Yeah. So, but I will say, we could talk more about the process, but Steve and I, so I should have mentioned this at the beginning, and Steve, if you're listening, I'm sorry that I didn't. So this contest was entered by me and my best friend, who I knew at the start of the season was a really sharp NFL handicapper. And I was like, Steve, you need to get more on the scene here. Why don't we enter the Circa contest together? You create a Twitter, and then we'll go about this and create a podcast every week. Because it's the first time for both of us entering. And so that's kind of storybook itself. Like the fact that we haven't had any prior experience. We just chatted about it every week, but really that process that we can get into more if you guys would like. I mean, of sticking to how we talked about these games every week, we really did not deviate, because at a certain point we were doing well, and I didn't want anything to corrupt. You get so superstitious as a sports bettor. I didn't want anything to come in between that and distract us in any way. So that was tough to do. That was probably one of the harder parts of actually staying on course, was sticking to the same process.
Yeah, and you see how many different processes go into these contests. And just a little background information I said I would dig up. Derek Stevens operating the thing out there, which really great guy. I was fortunate enough to talk to him on my previous podcast today on sports betting, right when they opened up on June 1st and 19. Now, as far as the contest goes, I believe it's tied to the same start date as that actual Circa resort there. So going on, I think the third year, fourth year here soon. So we're about to see the half decade.
Oh wow, okay.
Of the now. I think there was some name change or so the contest itself, I think, has a few more years in the age department. But as far as the Circa Sportsbook and their new resort and everything, and where the contest is held at June 1st, 2019.
Yeah, I believe the Westgate Super Contest was the one that's been around for quite some time.
Westgate's been around for a few decades.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
And that's also the one that Steve Fezzik won multiple times, and others have won.
He's won it twice.
Yeah. It became more prominent through those. Okay, that makes sense. I guess that's why they call it Circa Sports Million 3. That makes sense.
That makes sense. We cracked that code.
We're in the trilogy. So this process, Chris, because principles are very important here at SWU. They're going to be heavily prominent throughout each course, each podcast, each content piece that we do. Discipline, staying true to your system. Like you said, you got to fight off different superstitions as a bettor. How did you stay true to that? The results probably made it pretty easy, but when you have testing outside factors, how do you stay true to that?
Well, I'll start with saying, I think Steve, not only just because he's my friend, because oftentimes you don't really want to go in business with your friends, that could corrupt things. But Steve has this like exceedingly confident way about him, almost like brash. He like, when he has like a final decision about a bet, it's like you almost start believing it. You're like, wait a second, even if you're categorically against what he's saying. Whereas I'm the traditional like overanalyzer. So I thought that we made a good combination, because he could talk me off overanalyzing, but I could also give him some tidbits to think about. Obviously Steve, a hyper analyzer as well, but he doesn't let it hold him back like I do sometimes. So we were just a good 1-2 punch in that way. In some parts of our process. So we had a Wednesday podcast every week at 6:30 live on Twitter. That would go up in the Odds Breakers stream. And really that's what started the process. We didn't think about the lines too much before that. I mean, it doesn't make much sense to think about the lines much before that, especially in a COVID year, right? With all the things that can come up, but just with injuries in general and all the things that can come up in an NFL week, these lines are going to change. And when they come out in Circa on Thursday, they lock into those lines. So they don't change after that. And usually they're released around like 12 o'clock on Thursday, Pacific time. I think it's around there. So we talk about it on Wednesday, and then the lines would come out, and based on our observations and our angles, which were really speculative on Wednesday, now we can start to see like where the lines are and kind of how that fits with our narratives. And from there, we would just text a lot back and forth. Again, not overthinking these things, but making sure that we're challenging each other's notions enough to where, this is something I'm thinking about, whether it's line movement or whether, it's a matchup advantage, you have to carry on the conversation, whether it's with yourself or with whoever you're entering into the contest with. Because, if you're in my opinion, if you're just trusting the gut instinct initially, oftentimes those are right, by the way, but it's probably, not likely that all 5 of your like initial gut instincts are going to be right. So it's just a lot of back and forth through text. And probably the biggest thing that we did is we trusted our own assessments and our own numbers, and we did not listen. I made it such a point. It was so hard to do because I love podcasts about sports betting.
Oh yes.
Like I'm probably going to listen to this one back, right. Because hey, it's, but I listened to 0 NFL podcasts, like just nothing. All the information that I got was objective, so it was, facts and injuries and data. But I didn't want even those guys out there who I really respect in the sports betting world. I didn't want them to lead me in one direction because, we really wanted our picks to be our picks.
Yeah.
So we really stuck to that every week. I mean, I didn't read articles. I didn't listen to podcasts. And it was just me and Steve talking things through. And of course, there's a big history of paying attention to football and sports betting on football for a long time before we entered the contest, for years and years on end. But I think it's about trusting yourself. It's about avoiding distractions, and it's about not overthinking. Because I guarantee you, if I was in the contest alone, I would have done well, but there's no way that I would have placed. The combination of me and Steve, I think, either find the right partner or find a way to, to play contrarian with yourself or to make yourself more confident, because it's really hard to put those in, especially when you're under pressure at the end. Like, all right, those picks are locked in. So here we go from here on, and there's nothing you can do to change it. So you better be confident. It better be final. But at the end of the day, you can overanalyze all day and all night, so you have to trust your assessment and you have to trust your own numbers at a certain point.
Right.
So what happened when you guys were sitting there talking through it? So you've got, 16 games a week, most weeks. So if you liked this one side, and maybe did you guys come independently with your picks? And then, if you guys differed, you just crossed the game off. What did the actual picking process look like?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So we would never share our insights before the podcast.
No.
I mean, if we did, very little, like right away, Steve, I'm leaning on this, what do you think? But nothing, nothing like in depth. And I think that's a really good point, Paul, because that was actually when we went on the podcast. And if you listen back to any of those podcasts, there's a real visceral response from both of us, I think, as we're hearing the other person say what they think, because I would march into the podcast sometimes like, wait till Steve hears this narrative. I got the matchup figured out. I'm very confident about this. But Steve would give me something that I would be like, oh, wow, like that is something I haven't thought about at all. A great example was when the Steelers faced the Browns, I believe in week 17. I really liked the Browns in that contest. I thought that the Browns were gonna, they were kind of due for a big game. But then just because I wasn't thinking about it, I don't think I would have made the bet ultimately. But Steve reminded me, hey, Chris, this is Big Ben's last game at Heinz Field. How are we going to go against Big Ben, right? I mean, and I would say probably the most consistent thing for us all year were motivational angles. You know, Steve is very good at that too. I really have to give him a lot of credit for that. But we are not afraid to talk about that and base our bets almost entirely off that. If the data and other things support it, and there's a motivational angle in there that is going to send this team, you know, they're going to make this team play mentally harder than the other team. That might be something that a lot of people aren't thinking about, right? Like after the Raiders went through all that turmoil, we played on them the next week because they were, well, I don't know if we played on them after the John Gruden stuff, but I think either it was Henry Ruggs or it was something, but we played off.
They
them
won the
based- oh,
game. They won after Gruden. Yeah.
they
Is
did,
that the one?
right? And it was on the road too, I
Denver.
believe.
They played at Denver and they
Yes.
won.
Yes. And we also played on the Raiders. We didn't play on the Raiders. We thought about playing the Raiders after John Madden died because
Yeah, that would have been smart.
you know, there's just extra like, you know, mental motivational things that happen. These are still human beings
Right.
who are professional athletes, and they can live up to their full potential even just for one game sometimes, right? So really the assessments and the angles were very fresh on the podcast, and I think it made us always take a step back, like live on air, and then we would always leave the podcast with 2 to 4, probably 2 to 3 bets that we both really like together, because it just kind of hit together on the podcast. There's a chemistry to the, you know, when you talk about all the different angles, whether it's, you know, data matchups, like how good this team is against the run, etc. And then, you know, home field, the spot, the motivation, and just how good the team is, obviously, compared to the other team. When all those things add up, we would always come away with at least a few picks that we really like. And that was such a comfort. Even in the last week that happened, I felt very nervous about that last week, and we still came away from that podcast with the solid 2 picks that we both really liked. So I don't know, you know, I've been speculating on this all week, right? Because it's like, what am I supposed to believe, that I'm like the sharpest NFL handicapper after this? Like, that's not, you know, I mean, that I don't, you know, nobody really knows anything in this sport of sports betting, right? Like we're all just kind of guessing and trying to figure it out. But I do think that you can come up with plenty of trends, and if you find the right contrarian thinking and partner, then that's even better.
Yeah, there are a lot of different processes. So contrarian, you know, it's like an extrapolated daily fan. You know, you got to make your right plays, your chalk plays here and there, but you've really got to nail those contrarian plays. And you know, you spoke about the paralysis by over-analysis aspect of it a lot, and I know for sure, especially when I get digging into college basketball, I love to okay, well, where do I go from here? This is a lot of information, but it sounds like you guys did a great job at capitalizing on your process and not allowing that paralysis to get a chance to really set in.
Well, yeah, and something I should point out too is we really didn't think about what anybody else was picking the entire time. I don't think that should be a part of anybody's process. Now, I don't know. Maybe there are guys that have like won a few times super contests and they always think about that. But for us, to eliminate picks because you think many people are going to pick them might still rob you of a win.
Yeah.
You know, so I mean, at the last week we were thinking about that a little bit, but ultimately we didn't let that, you know, play a deciding factor in our final picks, because at the end of the day, you're just trying to get the best record possible, you know, and if you do have that, then at least you'll have the best shot at being towards the top.
Is there a pick that either sticks out this year that was awesome, or maybe one that really sticks out for the wrong reasons?
Yeah, another great question. I mean, I will say week 17 stuck out in general because it felt really easy. And I was like, what is happening here? Like we didn't sweat in a single game in week 17. I'm trying to go back and look at what those picks were. I mean, I know we had the Patriots. That was another huge line. I mean, Patriots, I believe were -16 or -15.5.
Against Jacksonville.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
against Jacksonville at home, right, to earn a playoff berth.
Yeah.
But we know, right, some of the data, like without getting too into the data, we know that those big lines, even though they're scary, they hit more often than they don't. So we didn't shy away from those. But so I would say week 17 in general stood out because, here we are going 5-0, no sweats at all. It's like, oh, okay, so we can actually do something here, and things are just kind of. But I mean, I have to say this, Paul. In week 18, the Browns game stands out because that was our one loss, and that felt a little phony. But also in week 18, the fact that the Bills scored that final touchdown. I mean, I still don't know why they went for a touchdown there. They didn't have to do that at all. So it felt like that was a little bit of a divine intervention. And there was definitely a few other spots. I mean, Steve is an Eagles fan. I'm a Giants fan. So somehow we're still friends. But I must say, at the beginning of the year, we said we're not going to play many Eagles and Giants games because it's too much pressure. Because if we pick them to lose, then we're still going to want them to win. We played the Giants and Eagles almost every week.
I'm a Dolphins fan, and I think I played the Dolphins like 16 of 18 weeks or something.
Yeah,
that team though too.
That's it. We know the NFC East. Like I know the Giants' tendencies. I mean, which quite frankly, I know how bad the Giants are. And like I know how they couldn't score. I mean, I've been anticipating matchups every week. Like maybe this is the week we can score. And so if I'm saying they can't score, no. So I think that's it too. You can't be afraid to put your personal team and your personal like analysis of who you want to win kind of to the side.
Yeah. You can bet with your heart. It's okay. People do worse with their hearts.
Yeah. Well, in my case, bet against my heart because I would bet against. I mean, I almost 100% would bet against the Giants.
Yeah. Oh, so. Yeah. Well, guys, we got probably a couple minutes left on here. Kind of want to reverse engineer the intro and kind of do what's called an outro here and just refamiliarize everyone. Some of the stuff we talked about at the top and make sure that we keep the excitement level up as we move on to episode 2 because I mean the sky's the limit here with Sports Wagering University, and we got a ton of sharp minds on board, and you're just going to see more and more different personalities and involvement and learning courses. So I'm, like I said, thankful to be a part of this. I can't wait to learn from Ron Ace, like an original player in the game. So Chris, Paul, I'll let you guys kind of have your little monologues, outro messages, all that good stuff. Don't forget to follow me though at DALE007 on Twitter. So
I think this has been great. It's so cool. Congratulations, Chris. It's really cool to hear the process and the way you guys do things and the way you did it. So congratulations and thanks for being on. Anything you want to leave us or the listeners for today?
Well, I just want to say, man, that time flew by, guys. I mean, quite honestly, and this is kind of Steve and I's, or me and Steve's brand. We're just like regular guys who love sports and love sports betting, and this is all surreal to me still. So it's hard for me to not be long-winded about Circa. I'm like high in the sky right now, but I just appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk about it at Farley Bets, and follow us at Sports Wager U. I mean, so many classes, podcasts, and opportunities to learn more about sports betting is around the corner, guys. And this is only the beginning.
Absolutely. Paul, Chris, I did that earlier. I combined y'all's names and y'all sound like a KISS member. So anyways, that'll be easy for me to remember everyone. And, this was a blast. Like you said, it went way too fast. We don't have a formal outro other than the fact that we're happy to do this. And again, at Sports Wagering, you guys make sure to follow us and go to that website.